The fence wasn't what broke me. It was the way they didn't even knock. I was out there trimming my rose bushes like I do every Thursday morning. Same spot, same shears, same coffee cup on the porch rail. Nothing different, until I saw 3 men in orange vests drive metal posts straight through the edge of my garden. My garden. Right through Harold's roses. Not one of them looked my way. Not one asked if I was all right with it. No knock. No letter. No warning. Just the sharp sound of hammers clanging into roots that had been there longer than most of their mortgages. I heard them whisper, 2 houses down the week before, "She's too old to keep up. That bench is an eyesore, her yard looks tired." And someone else said, "She's sweet, but it's time the street got a facelift." They didn't say it to my face, of course. Folks like that rarely do. But they meant every word. Too old. Too cluttered. Too stuck in the past. Funny thing is, they were right about one part. I am from the past. But what they didn't know was, I've been holding onto a piece of paper since 1972. One that's been folded, taped, and yellowed over the years. It sat in a locked tin beside Harold's service medals. I hadn't touched it in decades. Until that morning. Until they tried to fence me out of something I built. That little piece of paper held a quiet truth. And it didn't just protect my garden. No. It changed the whole street. And I'm going to tell you how. Now before I go on, let me say this real quick. Thank you for sitting with me today. Really. Thank you. Whether you're listening from your kitchen table, your back porch, or in the quiet of your car, I see you and I feel you. Can I ask you something? Have you ever been pushed out of something you poured your heart into? Ever built a home, a family, a little corner of peace, only to have folks act like you don't belong in it anymore? Like you're in the way of their progress? Maybe they didn't say it outright. Maybe it came in quiet ways. The way they stopped inviting you, the way they moved forward without asking, the way they looked at you like you were stuck in yesterday. That's what this story is really about. It's not just about fences or roses or driveways. It's about dignity. It's about knowing what you built, what you protected, and what you still carry, even when people think you've been forgotten. If you've ever been made to feel invisible, like your history didn't matter, like your presence was a burden, I want you to know, this porch light story, it's for you. And if any piece of this touches your heart, go ahead and tell me your story in the comments. I read them, every single one. Sometimes with a little laugh, sometimes with a tear. This ain't just my front porch. It's ours now. And you're welcome here, anytime. Well, since you're here, let me tell you a little more about me, and how this all began. My name's Margaret. Folks around here just call me Miss Maggie. I'm 78 years old, and I've lived in this same little brick house for 47 years. Raised my only daughter here, lost my husband here, and buried more than a few tears into this soil. We bought this place back in 1972. It didn't look like much then, just a run-down shell of a house with patchy grass and a broken fence. But Harold, my husband, he had vision. He always saw things for what they could be, not just what they were. He dug every hole in that yard with his bare hands, planted the first rose bush right after our daughter was born, said he wanted something beautiful to grow alongside her. Over the years, that little garden grew into a whole world. Lilies in the corner, sunflowers along the path, ivy curling up the trellis he built me for our 25th anniversary. That garden became my peace, my company after Harold passed, my reminder that things could still bloom even after loss. But as the years rolled by, the street changed. The old neighbors, the ones who used to wave and stop to chat, they moved out or passed on, and in came the new ones. Young, fast-moving, fancy cars, trimmed hedges, all matching mailboxes, everything sharp and modern. I didn't mind it, not at first. Change is part of life, but slowly I started feeling it. That quiet shift. The way their smiles stopped reaching their eyes. How they'd rush past when I was sweeping the porch. How they talked to each other but only waved at me from a distance. Then came the comments. Little things like, "Have you ever thought about redoing the front?" Or, "Your wind chimes are kind of loud, huh?" And when one of them said, "Your bench is sweet, but it's kind of vintage," I knew what they meant. It was their polite way of saying I didn't fit their picture anymore. My ivy was too wild. My flowers weren't in a straight line. My wind chimes didn't match their silent electric fences. But what they didn't understand What they never stopped to ask was that this garden wasn't just decoration. It was my memory. It was my grief, my healing, my prayers whispered into the soil. Harold's hands were in that dirt. My tears had watered those roses more times than the rain ever did. They saw an old lady with an untidy yard. But I was a woman standing on 47 years of love. And they tried to bury that with a fence. Things started shifting when the new folks formed that neighborhood committee, or as they like to call it, the HOA. Now don't get me wrong, I've seen a lot in my time. I know folks want order, neat yards, painted shutters, all that. That's fine. But there's a difference between care and control. They started holding meetings every other week. Most of them in the biggest house on the block, the one with the black metal gate and the video doorbell. They didn't invite me to the first two. I figured maybe they thought I wouldn't be interested. But by the third one, someone left a flyer in my mailbox. It wasn't handwritten. Just printed words with times, rules, and a friendly reminder about appearance standards. At the next meeting, I showed up, wearing my Sunday dress, same one I wear to funerals and the first day of spring. I sat on the back patio while they talked about things like new speed bumps, approved paint colors, and matching fences. Every house was on the list. Every house but mine. I raised my hand to ask a question, but the man leading the meeting smiled thin and said, "Let's circle back to that, Miss Maggie." They never did. One woman, real sweet-looking with shiny earrings and a perfect ponytail, leaned over and whispered, "We're just trying to keep things uniform. Nothing personal. Uniform." That's what they wanted. Clean, quiet, controlled, and I didn't fit. Then one morning, it was a Wednesday, I stepped out to water the front beds, and what did I see? A fence, half-built, running right through the edge of my garden. Metal stakes already in the soil, thin wood panels stacked on the sidewalk, and 3 men, young, in boots, sweating under the sun, hammering without a word. No knock, no letter, no consent, just nails in the earth that held my husband's roses. I stood there frozen, mouth dry, hand still holding the watering can. One of the men looked at me like I was interrupting him. I didn't yell, I didn't cry. I just walked back inside, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the spot where Harold used to eat his toast. Later that day, I heard the same whispers float down the street. "It's about property value. Her yard throws off the whole look. She's sweet, but..." Sweet. That's what they always say right before they do something unkind. But I knew it wasn't about property value. That was just the polite cover. They wanted me out of sight. They wanted my garden gone, my bench gone, my memories erased, so they could have a prettier street for their photos and real estate listings. But here's what they forgot. They built a fence to erase me. But they forgot who laid the bricks beneath their feet. After that morning, I didn't say a word. Not to the men building the fence. Not to the neighbors walking their little dogs. Not to the woman who always jogged past and waved without really seeing me. I didn't argue. I didn't write a letter. I just let them think I was tired, too tired to push back. And for a while, maybe I was. I sat on my porch, same spot as always, coffee in hand. Watched as the fence went up, not just around my garden, but around their minds too. They thought they'd handled the problem. But I wasn't defeated. I was thinking and remembering. Each morning I still watered the roses from my side. Bent over and trimmed the vines that now hung across cold boards. I didn't stop tending the garden just because they built a wall. I knew the roots ran deeper than anything they could see. One afternoon after the mail came and the street went quiet, I pulled down the attic ladder. That attic, it smelled like old summers. Dust, cedar, and thyme. I climbed up slow, one hand on the rail, one on my knee, and opened the same tin box I hadn't touched in decades. The same one Harold used to keep his army medals, his father's Bible, and a few yellowed papers we never talked about much. There it was, folded in half 3 times, held together by a bit of dried-out tape, the deed. The original land survey from 1972. Back then, property lines were drawn with a bit more heart. Harold knew the man who sold us this land, knew his family, and that man gave us more than just a house. He gave us the narrow strip that ran behind the other driveways. Said, "It's old farmland, but it'll mean something someday." Harold tucked that paper away and told me once, "This stretch here, behind the fences and under the pavement, it's ours. Might not look like much now, but keep the paper safe, Maggie." just in case. At the time, I thought he was just being careful. But now, I knew exactly what he meant. So I took the papers, laid them flat on the table, smoothed out the creases, poured myself a fresh cup of tea. And I just sat there, reading the lines that marked what was mine. I didn't feel old in that moment. I felt steady. And I knew something they didn't. They thought the fence was the end of the story. But to me, it was the beginning of a very quiet return. A few weeks later, my grandson Corey came by. He's 28 now, tall, kind-hearted, and always a little overprotective of his granny. He doesn't visit every weekend like he used to, but when he does, he brings me cinnamon rolls from the bakery across town and hugs that last a little longer than they used to. That Saturday, he pulled up in his little black car and walked straight toward the fence. I watched him stop mid-step, eyebrows drawn tight. He turned to me and said, "Granny, what in the world is this?" I just smiled and said, "Well, that's what they call progress around here." He didn't laugh. He didn't even blink. "They can't do this," he said, hands on his hips. "This is your land. They didn't even ask. Why didn't you say something?" I shrugged, quiet. Because some battles you don't rush into. You wait. You gather. You listen. But then I reached behind me, into the house, and handed him the deed. Still folded, still creased from all those years. He took it, opened it carefully, and started reading. His eyes widened by the second. His finger traced the boundary lines, the hand-drawn markings, the old signature from 1972. "Wait. This whole stretch, behind the fences, under their driveways, this is yours?" I nodded. "Harold and I bought more than just a house, Corey. We bought the ground that everyone forgot." Corey looked at me like I had just handed him a buried treasure. "Granny, this is big. Let me take this to someone I know, a friend from college. He does land surveys. Real sharp guy. If this is what I think it is, they're the ones trespassing, not you." I looked him in the eye and said, "All right, but go slow. We don't throw rocks when we hold the truth. We place it gently and let it speak." So he took the deed, wrapped it in a manila folder, and promised to call me in a few days. Didn't take long. 3 days later, my phone rang while I was clipping lavender by the porch. Corey's voice was quick but steady. "Granny, it's all there. The lines, the survey, the records. They checked every detail." Then came the part I already knew but needed to hear. "That land? It's yours. Their driveways, their sidewalk extension, even the HOA mailbox post. They're sitting on your soil." I sat down slow on the porch bench, not out of shock, but from the quiet weight of it all. See, it's one thing to feel overlooked. It's another thing to know without question that the very people who tried to push you out are standing on what's rightfully yours. And I wasn't angry. I was calm, because now I had something they never expected, proof. And it was time to let the truth do what fences never could, speak. After Corey's call, I sat still for a long time. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't plotting revenge. I was simply breathing. Because when life hands you something heavy, like truth, like land, like the past rising up, you have to hold it with both hands. The next morning, I put on my soft blue cardigan, the one Harold always liked, and called a quiet little law office just outside of town. Not the big fancy firm downtown, just a local man named Mr. Jacobson, who's been doing boundary cases since the days when folks still used paper maps. I told him my name, told him I had an old deed, told him I didn't want to fight, just to be heard. He said, "Bring it in, Miss Maggie. Let's take a look." So I did. Brought the deed in a brown envelope, still folded, but cleaned up. He read it twice, then laid it beside the county's current property records. His eyes narrowed, but not in doubt, in focus. He leaned back and said, "Well now, looks like this street's been standing on your soil for quite some time." I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just said I figured as much. Mr. Jacobson got to work, quietly, carefully. He had a land surveyor confirm the boundaries, had official maps printed, all legal, all clean, and then the letters were prepared, certified, signed, documented, each one addressed to a different neighbor on the block. Not angry letters. Not loud ones. Just calm, clear statements backed by law. "Dear property owner, you are currently using land that was never legally transferred. This includes driveways, fences, and additional installations. We request that you contact us immediately to discuss a lease agreement or appropriate remedy for use of this private property." No threats, no shouting, just facts. The return address? My name, Margaret Louise Henderson. I didn't deliver them myself. The mailman did that part. But I watched from my porch as each one landed in a mailbox. Watched the eyebrows raise. Watched the heads tilt. Watched the whispering begin again. Only this time, it wasn't about me being old or in the way. It was about the ground beneath them shifting. And I didn't have to say a word. I didn't raise my voice. I just raised a boundary. The day after those certified letters landed, the block changed. You could feel it in the air, like the stillness before a summer storm. First, it was just sideways glances. Folks slowing down when they walked past my porch, looking at their driveways like they'd never really noticed them before. Whispering over trash cans, checking their mail twice. Then came the knock, a soft one, nervous. I opened the door and found the HOA chair standing there. Mr. Bradshaw, mid-40s, always wore golf shirts, had that Bluetooth thing in his ear even when he wasn't on a call. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Maggie, surely this can't be right." I tilted my head. "Which part?" He cleared his throat, holding one of the letters in his hand. "It says here we're encroaching on your property, that the land behind our fences, even our driveways, belongs to you." I nodded, calm. "That's exactly right," back, and motioned for him to come in. "Would you like some tea? I've got sweet and unsweet." He paused, then nodded slowly and followed me to the kitchen, like a man walking into a room he used to own but forgot the door had a lock. I poured the tea steady, sat across from him at the kitchen table, the same one Harold built back in '75, and slid a folder across the surface. Inside, a clean copy of the original deed, with survey lines, dates, signatures, clear as day. "You built your fences," I said, voice soft, "your lights, your fancy little motion sensors, all on my soil." He blinked, looked down, looked back up, but no one ever said anything. I leaned in just a bit. I never had to, not until now. See, the thing about being quiet for a long time is, people mistake it for weakness, but it's not. It's patience, it's memory, it's knowing exactly when to speak and when to let the facts do the talking. Word spread quick after that. One by one, neighbors started showing up, some alone, some with their spouses. A few looked angry, but most just looked embarrassed, and I stayed kind, always. Offered tea to each one, never raised my voice, just showed them the same paper. I didn't throw the past in their faces, I simply unrolled it. Because here's the truth they never saw coming. I was the one they erased. And now I held the ink. Now once the paper settled in, so did the silence. Not the peaceful kind, no, this was the heavy, awkward kind. The kind that hangs in the air when people realize they've crossed a line they never thought existed. Some neighbors avoided me altogether, wouldn't wave, wouldn't meet my eyes. Others got bold, even a little angry. One man, the one with the loud truck and the big fence, said to my face, "This is just you trying to stir things up. It's not fair." I just looked at him, calm. What's not fair is being erased on your own land. Most, though, came quiet, soft-spoken, humbled. They asked what I wanted. I told them the truth. I'm not here to kick anybody out, but from now on, we'll do things properly. See, I didn't want drama. I didn't want lawsuits or headlines. I just wanted respect. So I offered leases. Each one tailored to their space, but all with yearly renewal, on my terms. Not the HOA's terms, not the committee's terms, mine. Some neighbors nodded and signed. Others hesitated, tried to negotiate, get around it. One couple even offered to buy the land outright. A check already written, pen in hand. I slid it back across the table. "It's not about dollars," I said gently. "It's about dignity. Because if I sold it, if I let them turn my roots into square footage, into numbers on paper, then I'd be no different than the people who thought I was disposable. This land held memories, held history, held Harold. And there are some things you don't sell. And wouldn't you know, one morning, I opened my front door and saw that the fence around my garden was gone. No ceremony, no apology, just gone. The posts had been pulled, the panels stacked neatly to the side. My roses could breathe again. And me? I stepped outside, barefoot on the cool grass, and just stood there for a long moment. Didn't smile. Didn't cry. Just breathed. Because sometimes roots speak louder than words, and mine had finally been heard. After that fence came down, something shifted. Not just in my yard, but in the air around it. I walked outside that next morning with my gloves and my trowel, same as I always had. The grass was still damp from the night rain, the sky still waking up, But for the first time in a long while, my garden felt like mine again. I didn't waste time. Went straight to the nursery, 2 towns over, and bought 6 fresh rose bushes. White, pink, and 1 deep red, just like the ones Harold planted when our daughter got married. Planted every single one with my own hands. Knees in the dirt, heart steady. Took my time. Said a little prayer over each one. Not for revenge, not for show, just for peace. I scrubbed the old bench clean and oiled the wood. Set it right back under the dogwood tree where it used to be. Hung my wind chimes again, the copper ones with little glass birds at the ends, and that first breeze that came through? It didn't just ring the chimes, it sang through them. It sounded like freedom, like memory, like home. After that, the neighbors changed too. They didn't rush past me anymore. They waved, first out of habit maybe, then out of respect. One man, the same one who once said my yard looked tired, walked over one evening while I was watering the lilies and said, "You know, your garden's the most peaceful spot on the block." I didn't say much, just nodded and said, "She's been through a lot, but she's still standing." And I could have meant the garden, but he knew I meant me. Funny, isn't it? How quickly people learn to respect the things they once tried to hide, once they find out who they really belong to. Because roots run deep, and when they rise up, they bring truth with them. It was a Thursday afternoon, just after the sun had started to dip low. I was sitting on my porch with a cool glass of lemonade, watching the bees dance around the lavender, when I heard the gate creak open. Soft footsteps, slower than usual. I looked up and saw her. Amanda, the young mother from 3 houses down, always put together, always in a hurry. I'd seen her rushing her little girl to school, hosting block meetings, smiling like everything in the world was in her control. But that afternoon, she looked different. No lipstick, no sunglasses. Just her and her daughter, maybe 6 or 7, holding a folded piece of paper in both hands. Amanda didn't walk all the way to the porch. She stopped at the first step, took a breath and said, "Miss Maggie, I need to say something." I just waited. Sometimes, silence makes folks more honest. She looked down, then back up. Her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "I voted for the fence. I did, and I didn't even fight it. I went along with what they said, that it would make the street look cleaner, newer, better." Her hands were shaking a little. "But I never thought about what it meant to you. I followed the others. I'm sorry." Her daughter stepped forward and held out the paper. I took it gently and opened it. Inside was a drawing. My garden, my bench, my wind chimes. In a child's hand it said, "I like your flowers. I'm sorry we were mean, from Lily." I looked at the little girl, I smiled, then I looked at her mother. "Amanda," I said, "I accept your apology, but not your excuse." She nodded. She knew, because people don't change till they see the cost of their comfort. It's easy to join the crowd when the crowd is loud. It's easy to point at the oldest house and say, "That's what's wrong." It's harder to stand still, look someone in the eye, and say, "I was wrong." But to her credit, Amanda did. And as they turned to leave, her daughter ran back and hugged my leg, then skipped off like nothing had happened. And maybe in that moment, something had changed. Not because it was fixed, but because it was finally seen. The next morning, I took my time getting out of bed. No rush, no reason to hurry. Just the kind of morning where the house is quiet and the light through the window feels warm before you even open the curtains. I made myself some tea, wrapped a light shawl around my shoulders, and stepped out into the yard. This time, I didn't just walk to the porch. I stepped off it, slow, steady, cane in hand, and made my way through the garden path, one step at a time. I hadn't done that in weeks. Not since the fence first went up. But now, the space was open again, free, like the air itself remembered how to move. I stopped in front of the dogwood tree, the one Harold planted the spring after his mother passed. He always said it reminded him that even grief could bloom into something gentle. "That's Harold," I whispered, touching the bark. Stubborn, quiet, but rooted deep. I moved on to the hydrangeas, the ones that only bloom half the year but always come back just when you think they won't. "These are my daughter's tears," I said softly. The ones she didn't want me to see when her marriage ended, but I held them anyway. And then I stood in front of the roses, bright, bold, unapologetic. Some petals soft and open, others closed, still holding on. A few thorns poking out like little warnings. "And these," I said, "these are me. soft, but thorned. Not bitter, just protective. Not fragile, just aware of what I've had to survive. I kept walking. My cane tapped the stepping stones Harold had laid himself. I breathed in the smell of the earth, the flowers, the life still buzzing around me. The wind picked up, and my wind chime started to sing again. Not loud, just enough to remind me that sound can be soft and still carry weight. And I smiled. Not because everything was perfect now, but because I was still standing, still tending, still here. Let them build their fences. Let them paint their shutters the same color and plant their matching shrubs. I've got deeds, and I've got roots, and there's nothing uniform about that, but it's real. It's lived in, it's earned, and more than anything, it's mine. Now, if you've made it this far, thank you. I mean that. I'm just an old woman sitting on her porch telling the truth the way it happened. But if you're still here, then maybe, just maybe, you felt some of this too. So let me speak to you directly now. If they've ever told you that you're outdated, that you don't fit in, that your way of doing things was too much or too slow or not with the times, you listen to me. You are not forgotten. You are not invisible. You are not a problem to fix or a memory to erase. You are not your noise. You are your roots. And roots, they run deep. They hold things steady when the storms come. They don't show off, but without them, nothing grows. If someone ever tries to fence you out, if they ever try to replace you or make you small, remind them who paved the ground they're walking on. Remind them gently. But don't ever let them bury you on land you own. You hear me? You don't have to yell. You don't have to beg. Just stand. Stand in what you built. Stand in what you know. Stand in the truth that they overlooked while they were busy trying to paint over history. Now, I want to hear from you. If someone ever tried to take your place, silence your story, or act like you didn't matter, share it in the comments below. This porch may be mine, but this space, it's ours. Tell your truth. Don't wait 40 years like I did. And if you felt something in your heart while listening, don't forget to subscribe to Granny Stories. This porch light stays on for folks like you, always. Thank you for listening, and until next time, stay rooted.